power and salvation comes through the name. What happens when that name is changed? Okay, so I have up here number 2424, the name Jesus, right? Now, it says, and I wanted to write that up on the board in the Strong's lexicon, of Hebrew origin. Of Hebrew origin. And it says, okay, of course it says Jesus there, but then it says that is Yahushua. Now, of course it says Yahushua, but we'll touch on that, later on. But the name comes from number 3091. If you go to number 3091, this is the name that you have there, Yahushua. And we talked about that in the previous segment. And what the name Yahushua basically means, Yah, he saves, right? You have the name of the Father right there, Yah. And then the addition of the Wav, it means he, Yah, he, and then it's turned Shua right here, saves. Because remember, the Shin and the Ayin, that is the parent root of the term Yasha, which means to be safe, pointing to salvation. Okay? So the name Yahushua means Yah, he saves. And when he was given that name by the angel, right? Remember, Matthew 1:21. When that angel came down and he told Miriam and Yusuf what the name of this child was supposed to be, did he tell them Jesus or did he tell them Yahushua? Because this is what we don't want to do. Because what I hear people doing is this. Whenever it comes to that name, even the correct name, they'll say Yahushua, or whichever version of the name they may say Yeshua, which is the Aramaic, and we touched on that in the previous segment as well. It simply means salvation. They may say that, but then they may say also known as, or better known as. We need to stop that, because what that implies is this. Let's take, for example, myself. Okay. Typically I don't do this, but just for example's sake, I'm going to do this. Now, my government name is Leonard. Leonard. Right? That's my name. But since I was a child, I was always referred to as a Lenny, which is considered to be a nickname. So my government name, my actual name is Leonard, but I'm also known as Lenny. So if you were to ask anybody who knows me, if you were to ask anyone who knows me for me or about me, you can ask them in either one of these names. You can ask them in regard to the name Leonard, for those who are familiar with that. But the majority of the people, they know me by Lenny. Okay? So my name is Leonard, but I'm also known as Lenny. So, and I'm going to emphasize this point because if you were to go back during the time of the Messiah or the early church, and you were to use the name Jesus, the Messiah at no point in time was referred to by that name. He wasn't. All of these things are developments that came after the fact. You see, when things were being changed. And one of the Moray recently, hallelujah, which is why I will put on my heart and my mind to encourage those who are listening, Shema Israel, pay attention. Because there was something developing within the early assembly, even during the time of the apostles. Shift, change. You know why? Because the opponent was at work. That's why, listen to something that Brother Shaul said. He said that the mystery of iniquity does already work. So something was already taking place. Why do you think the brother said, if he who comes preaches another Yahushua, he already started. I showed it to him. Why do you think the Messiah said, I have come in my Father's name, the Father's name being Yah? So he came with the reputation and the renown, the character, the honor, and the authority of Yah the Father. I am come in my Father's name, you don't receive me. But if another shall come in his own name, him you shall receive. Why do you think he said that? Because there was something that was going to take place. And it has taken place. And it has impacted the whole world. And what we want to see, what brought us there? Well, we want two other passages before we start getting into some of these prophecies. The first one is in Acts chapter 7 and verse 45, which reads, which also our fathers that came after brought in with Jesus into the possession of the Gentiles, whom God drave out before the face of our fathers unto the days of David. And the other passage is in Hebrews 4:8. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day? And I'm going to use the name Jesus because when you get into the King James Version from 1611, the Geneva Bible from 1560, and the Bishop's Bible from 1568, the name Jesus is used. But when you get into the later translations, the Bible in Basic English, or the World English Bible, or the Contemporary English Version, the name has been changed to Joshua. Why? In these two verses, think about it in this context, right? I would say this: out of the mouth of two or three shall a matter be established. So this is what happened. When they were translating, right? When they get to the name of the Messiah, and they replace it with Jesus, right? Now some people will argue, again, tooth and nail, that this is a legitimate translation. Well, see, they're not saying enough. There's another word, and we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. There's something else at work there, okay? But my point in saying that is this. When we get to these two names, it wasn't talking about the Messiah, Yahushua. It was a reference to the successor of Mosheh, which was Joshua, who had the exact same name, Yahushua. The exact same name. So when they were translating it, they put Jesus there, not realizing that it was talking about the successor of Mosheh. So when they realized that, why would they go back and change it from Jesus to Joshua? Think about that. These are two witnesses, as we look at this, of Hebrew origin. Okay? This term right here is not Hebrew, it's Greek. And we're going to touch on why that even exists. Because it exists for a reason. But because we are so far removed and we don't realize a lot of the backstory as to why that is there, it's accepted now as being legitimate. Not realizing the hand or the movement of the opponent. So let's go. Two things when it comes to translating and transliterating, right? To translate means to render in another language. That means that, for example, take the term house, something real simple. So in English, what we refer to as a house, in Hebrew they refer to as bet. Bet. Okay? In English, what we refer to as a man, in Hebrew they refer to as Aish or Ish. In English, what they refer to as a woman, in Hebrew they refer to as Isha. Isha, right? Okay. So it's a totally different word. Now, transliterate means to represent letters or words in the corresponding character of another alphabet. And what that means is this: when it comes to certain things, especially when it comes to, now there's an understanding when it comes to nouns versus proper nouns. Okay? I'm not sure how many of you have ever heard a news broadcast from another country, right? So we have what is in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America. We have where the president's office is. It's called the White House. The White House is actually a proper name, a proper noun. So whenever you hear another country on their news broadcast talking about the White House, they don't translate the name the White House into whatever language they speak, because it's a proper name, a proper noun. It remains the same. So they'll speak whatever their language is, and whenever they get to the White House, you know what they're going to say? The White House. We do the exact same thing. Vladimir Putin is not English. Osama bin Laden is not English. Barack Hussein Obama was not English. They were languages other than English, but because it's their proper name, you don't change it to what it means in English. You keep it the same. So you take somebody, Michael Jordan, right? Famous basketball player, known throughout the world. When he goes to visit, let's say, Israel, because they speak Hebrew there, they don't change his name to Mikael Yarden. They don't change it to that. And it's the same thing. They pronounce it just the way it is, Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan, both of those terms are originally Hebrew words. But just because he goes to visit Israel, they don't change the sound of his name. He's still Michael Jordan. And I'm making this point because whenever it comes to personal names, people don't realize that proper names don't change like that. When I go to another country, right, regardless of what it is, if I visit one of the African countries, you know what my name is? Leonard. If I visit any place down in South America, you know what my name is? Leonard. It's not going to change to whatever their word. It's not going to be translated. It's going to be transliterated. There's a difference. But when it comes to the name of the Most High, why is it that we have this idea that it's okay to translate opposed to transliterate? Meaning to represent the very same sounds in that language. Because that could be transliterated. And we're going to see some examples of it in our next segment. Okay? But for right now, let's go through some verses. Alright? In Daniel chapter 2, verses 37 to 39. And we went through this, so this will be somewhat of a refresher. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the mighty one of the heavens have given you a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into your hand, and hath made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. Now, what's happening here, just to briefly remind you, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, forgot the dream, was troubled by the dream, and he wanted to know what it meant. But first he needed to know what the dream was. So in comes Daniel. Daniel first tells him what the dream was, then Daniel proceeds to interpret the dream for him, and this is what he's doing right here. So he sees this great image, right? And what he's telling him now, you are the head of gold. In other words, this represents the Babylonian Empire. Remember? It said, and after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. When it says inferior to thee, think about an image. It was an image of a man. So it starts from the top, and then the head of gold, and then you had the breast and the arms of silver. That means the fact that you are actually descending, showing that you're going down. So he said, another kingdom is going to rise up inferior to thee. So look at it from this perspective. If the top of the head is what's the closest to the heavens, what's happening? You're moving further and further away. Keep that in mind. He says, verse 39, after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to you, that was the Median Persian Empire. Then it says, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. That is the Grecian Empire, and that is going to be our focal point for today. The Empire of Greece. Now, that's Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Daniel has a dream and visions. So in Daniel chapter 7 verse 6, it says, after this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard. Now, just to give you a brief reminder, Daniel had a dream and visions of 4 beasts that came up out of the sea. This is the third that he saw. Again, verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads. Keep that in mind. And dominion was given to it. So listen to what's being said about the Grecian Empire. in Daniel chapter 2:39, it says, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And then it says in verse 6 in chapter 7, and dominion was given to it, right? Now, of course, we drop down to Daniel 7:17, and he gives this interpretation. These great beasts which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth, right? Now, let's move on. Let's go to Daniel chapter 8, and let's read and let's see some more information about the Grecian Empire. See what we can get. So, Daniel chapter 8, starting verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw, that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. Now we're going to get into who that ram was when he gets into the interpretation of it. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth. Now remember what we saw in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel's vision. Alright? Keep these things in mind. Again, and an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between its eyes. Now there's a reason why it said, touch not the ground. Keep in mind, in Daniel's vision, this same empire that we're talking about, we're going to see that in the interpretation, but it's talking about the Grecian Empire. When it said that it had 4 wings, right? What that's supposed to be teaching us, we think about the idea of wings and think about somewhat flying, and it also implies, being fast. You ever seen these movies where they represent somebody that's running quick, like a Quicksilver or a Flash type of character, and they be running so fast it looks like they're not even touching the ground? Well, that's the idea, okay? It says, again, verse 5, and as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. We're going to see what that is shortly. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of the heaven. Now, these 4 notable horns that came from the one that was broken, go back to Daniel's vision, and it says not only did this leopard have 4 wings, it also had 4 heads. There's a reason, okay? We're going to see. Again, verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of the heavens. And out of one of them came forth a little horn. Now, let me just say, in Daniel chapter 7, it speaks of a little horn. This little horn is a different little horn from the little horn in Daniel chapter 7. However, we can learn about that little horn and what the little horn that Daniel saw, right? We can learn about some of what that little horn would do by comparing that little horn with this little horn. Okay, keep that in mind as well. All right. Verse 9 again. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. The pleasant land is the land of Israel. Okay, what was promised to Israel. Verse 10. And it waxed great, even to the host of the heavens, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Now, think about that. It cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Now, when it talks about the host of the heaven, right? Literally speaking, it's not talking about the actual host of the heaven. But we understand this is a prophecy. Remember, when it comes to taking the word at face value, there are exceptions. Poetry and prophecy. Why? Because prophecy oftentimes uses symbolic language, as it's doing right here. So, who are the hosts of the heaven? Who represents the creator of the heavens and the earth on earth? Israel. Remember when he told Abraham that your seed is going to be multiplied like the stars of the heavens? Keep that in mind. Daniel chapter 8, verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. What is he talking about? Now we are looking at the destruction of the worship. Whose worship? Israel's worship. Keep these things in mind. Verse 12. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. When it says it cast down the truth to the ground, Holy Scripture says the commandments are truth. The Torah is truth. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. The word was cast down to the ground by this individual. And we're going to see examples of that. Okay? Now, that was Daniel chapter 8, verse 12. We're going to drop down because we want to get to some of this interpretation. Now, in Daniel chapter 8, verse 21, it says, let me tell you who the other ones were first. The first one, the ram with the two horns, one was higher than the other one, that's the Median and Persian. The reason why one horn was higher than the other one was because it represented the Medians and the Persians. Okay? The two different leaders, the two different nations that came together as one. Alright? Now, in Daniel 8:21, it defines who the goat was. It says, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia or Greece. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So now, what we want to start doing, we want to tie into this particular part, 1 Maccabees. Okay? Now, in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, starting at verse 1, it says, and it happened, after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece, right? And made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became tributaries to him, right? Now, this is talking about who was referred to as Alexander the Great, right? Now, remember when it says, he's going to break it down. Going back to Daniel chapter 8 and verse 22, it says, now, that being broken, talking about that one notable horn. Remember when we read how the one notable horn was broken? It says, now, that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of that nation, but not in his power. Now, what this is talking about is when Alexander the Great died, right? That's the notable horn. The kingdom was then divided among 4 people. Excuse me. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 again, starting at verse 5. And after these things he fell sick, and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So he's the one that divided the kingdom among the 4 generals. Okay? Verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. And his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. So now we're seeing, like the scripture said, how it's starting to take over this earth. Okay? And dominion was given to it over the earth. Right? Daniel 8:23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. So remember when it talked about out of one of those 4 horns, another little horn is going to rise up. This is the little horn it's referring to now. So in 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 10 it says, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus or Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king.